When betrayal comes from those we love most, the wounds cut deeper than any knife. This is the story of Maggie Harris, a woman who discovered that family ties can become the chains that bind us to pain until we find the courage to break free. A journey of humiliation, heartbreak, and ultimately, redemption. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Maggie Harris clutched the small velvet box in her trembling hands, excitement fluttering in her chest as she watched her daughter Laura mingle with guests at her 40th birthday party. The November chill of Chicago seeped through the windows, but the living room felt warm with laughter and conversation. "Laura, darling," Maggie called softly, motioning her daughter over. "I have something special for you." Laura excused herself from her friends and approached, her eyebrows raised in curiosity. Her sleek black dress and perfect makeup made her look polished and composed, everything Maggie had always admired about her only child. "These pearls," Maggie began, opening the velvet box to reveal a pair of luminous pearl earrings. "Your father gave them to me on my 40th birthday. Now I want you to have them." Something flickered across Laura's face, not the joy or gratitude Maggie had anticipated, but something harder, colder. Laura's manicured fingers plucked the earrings from the box, holding them up to the light with clinical detachment. "Real pearls?" Laura's voice carried across the room, causing several guests to turn their heads. "I always thought you just wore cheap costume jewelry. You never told me you had valuable things like these." The words landed like a slap. Maggie felt her smile falter, her fingers curling reflexively around the now empty box. The room seemed to tilt slightly as a heavy silence descended. "Yes, they're real," Maggie managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you might like them." A friend of Laura's, Melissa was it, offered Maggie a sympathetic smile from across the room, but it only deepened her embarrassment. She'd spent weeks planning this moment, imagining Laura's delight at receiving such a meaningful heirloom. Laura slipped the earrings into her purse with casual indifference. "Thanks, Mom. They're interesting." Maggie retreated to the kitchen, busying herself with the cake preparations. Her hands shook as she arranged the candles. She'd endured the crushing grief of losing her husband 3 years ago, but somehow this dismissal from her own daughter, cut even deeper. When she returned with the cake, Laura was laughing with her friends, all traces of the awkward exchange seemingly forgotten. Maggie set the cake down carefully and stepped back, watching as her daughter closed her eyes to make a wish before blowing out the candles. What was Laura wishing for? Maggie wondered. And when had the distance between them grown so vast that she could no longer even guess? Later, as guests began to leave, Laura hugged Maggie briefly. "Thanks for the party, Mom, and the earrings. They're vintage. Very you." Maggie nodded, forcing another smile. She watched her daughter walk away to say goodbye to her friends, her back straight, her stride confident. Maggie's hand went instinctively to her own earlobe, where those pearls had once rested. Gifts from a man who had cherished her, who had seen the value in what she had to offer. Now they belonged to Laura, along with a piece of that precious memory. But standing alone in her living room, surrounded by empty glasses and discarded napkins, Maggie couldn't shake the feeling that something else had been lost today, something that might never be recovered. 2 days after the birthday party, Maggie was arranging fresh flowers in the living room when the doorbell rang. Laura stood on the porch, her smile bright and unexpected. "Mom, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." She breezed past Maggie into the house, her designer boots clicking against the hardwood floors. Maggie closed the door, pleasantly surprised by the impromptu visit. "Would you like some tea? I just made a pot." "Sure." Laura's eyes wandered around the living room, taking in the familiar furnishings with newfound interest. "Hey, Mom, those pearl earrings got me thinking. Do you have other jewelry? From Dad, I mean." The question landed with uncomfortable weight. Maggie set down the teacup she'd been filling, the porcelain clinking softly against the saucer. "I have a few pieces, yes. Can I see them?" Laura's voice had an eager edge Maggie hadn't heard in years. "I never knew Dad gave you real jewelry." Maggie hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right, come upstairs." They climbed the stairs to Maggie's bedroom, a sanctuary she rarely shared with anyone these days. The room still held traces of her husband, his reading glasses in a case on the nightstand, his favorite books lined neatly on the shelf. Kneeling before the closet, Maggie pulled out a small safe hidden beneath stacks of winter sweaters. She punched in the code, Laura's birth date, and felt a strange hollowness as each number registered with a soft beep. "This was your father's idea," Maggie explained, opening the safe. "He always worried about break-ins." Laura leaned forward eagerly as Maggie removed a velvet-lined tray containing several jewelry pieces. "This pearl necklace was my wedding jewelry," Maggie said, lifting a strand of creamy pearls that caught the afternoon light. "Your father saved for months to buy it." Laura nodded, her fingers already reaching for a diamond brooch nestled in the corner of the tray. "And this," Maggie continued, her voice softening, "was your grandfather's. Dad gave it to me on our 11th anniversary. Is all this stuff actually yours?" Laura asked, turning the brooch over in her hands. "Do you ever wear any of it?" "Of course I do," Maggie replied, slightly taken aback. "Each piece has a story. This ruby ring was for our 10th anniversary. And this gold locket holds a tiny photo from the day you were born." Laura sighed, setting the brooch back with visible impatience. "These all look so outdated, like museum pieces. Don't you have anything more modern?" Maggie's hand froze midway to a sapphire pendant. The words stung like salt in an open wound. She carefully returned the pendant to its velvet cushion, her earlier enthusiasm evaporating. "No," she said quietly, "nothing modern." That night, long after Laura had left, Maggie sat by her bedroom window, the jewelry box open beside her. Each piece gleamed in the dim light, repositories of memories that seemed suddenly heavy with loneliness. For the first time, she realized these treasures, these physical manifestations of love and commitment, now existed only in her heart. The stories they carried, the moments they commemorated, meant nothing to the one person she'd hoped would cherish them after she was gone. She closed the box with a soft click and returned it to the safe, wondering when sharing had become so painful. The telephone's shrill ring cut through the quiet afternoon. Maggie set aside her gardening magazine and reached for the receiver, already recognizing the cadence of her daughter's ringtone. "Mom?" Laura's voice came through with that familiar note of purpose. "I need to talk to you about something." Maggie settled back in her armchair. "What is it, dear?" "I'm thinking about trading in my car for a newer model, but I'm about $10,000 short." The words rushed out smoothly, practiced. "I was wondering if you could help me out." Maggie's throat tightened. Just last week, she'd committed to renovating the beach house, her long-postponed dream project. "I'm sorry, Laura. I've already allocated my savings for the beach house renovation." The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably. "Fine. I understand." Laura's voice had chilled considerably. The call ended abruptly, leaving Maggie staring at the phone in her hand. The next morning, Maggie sat at her kitchen table, coffee growing cold as she thumbed through the newspaper. Her conversation with Laura still nagged at her. Something about her daughter's recent interest in her jewelry, followed by this sudden request for money, struck a discordant note. The doorbell rang, her friend Patricia dropping by with fresh muffins as she did every Thursday. Over coffee, Maggie confided her concerns. "I don't know, Pat. First she wants to see all my jewelry, now she needs $10,000. It feels connected somehow." Patricia's expression shifted. "Maggie, have you seen today's classifieds?" "No, why?" Patricia turned the newspaper to the auction listings page. Maggie's heart stuttered as her eyes fell on a professionally photographed pair of pearl earrings. Her pearl earrings, the ones she had given Laura just a month ago. "These look exactly like the ones you described giving Laura," Patricia said gently. Maggie's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. The description confirmed her worst fear. Vintage Mikimoto pearl earrings, family heirloom, excellent condition. The asking price? $9,800. Her mind raced backward, replaying every moment. Laura's sudden interest in her jewelry collection, the careful cataloging of her possessions, the request for money coming so soon afterward, the pieces locked together with devastating clarity. "She sold them," Maggie whispered, the words tasting bitter. "She sold her father's gift." Patricia covered Maggie's trembling hand with her own. "Maybe there's an explanation." But Maggie knew. The pearls that had whispered of her husband's love each time she wore them had been reduced to a down payment on a newer model car. She'd given the earrings freely, yes, but never imagining they would be discarded so casually, their sentimental value ignored completely. Her first instinct was to confront Laura immediately, but something held her back. A deeper hurt was taking root, not just about the pearls, but about what they represented. How could she make Laura understand what she had thrown away? Not just jewelry, but connections, memories, history. Maggie carried the newspaper to the kitchen sink, as if distance from the image might dull its impact. She ran water over her empty coffee cup, letting the rush of sound fill the silence of her kitchen. I won't say anything. Not yet, she decided aloud. But I won't forget this either. The water swirled down the drain, carrying coffee remnants away. Maggie watched it disappear, feeling something inside her hardening with resolve. This bistro has the best risotto in Chicago, Maggie said, settling into her chair across from Laura and her longtime friend Julia. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching in the delicate floral pattern of Maggie's dress. Julia beamed. Maggie, that dress is lovely. The pattern brightens your whole face. Before Maggie could respond, Laura's derisive laugh cut through the pleasantry. Yeah, if by brighten you mean overwhelm. That grandma garden print is a bit much, even for her. Maggie's smile froze. She busied herself with the menu, trying to ignore the sting of her daughter's words. The waiter arrived to take their orders. Julia commented on the restaurant's famous ragu, mentioning she'd read about it in a food magazine. Laura swirled her wine, fixing Julia with a cool stare. Sorry, Julia, but don't mind her. My mother lives in the past. That dress? It belongs in a museum of fashion disasters. A heavy silence fell over the table. Julia's smile faltered. Maggie felt heat rising to her cheeks. Not just embarrassment, but a slow-building anger. This was supposed to be a pleasant lunch, a chance to repair their strained relationship. Please don't talk like that here, Maggie murmured, her voice barely audible. Laura shrugged. Relax, Mom. It's not personal. Something inside Maggie snapped. Months of accumulated hurts, the dismissal of her pearls, the casual cruelty, the growing disrespect, crystallized into a moment of clarity. Enough, Laura. Her voice was quiet but firm. I'm tired of hearing how outdated I am. You will not speak to me that way. The table fell silent. Laura took another sip of wine, her expression unchanged. Julia studied her napkin with sudden interest. I've just remembered an appointment, Maggie said, rising abruptly. She gathered her purse and the remains of her dignity. Julia, I'll call you later. Without waiting for a response, she walked out, her steps quickening as she reached the street. The spring air felt cool against her burning cheeks. Each stride away from the restaurant was both an escape and a silent declaration. Enough. Back home, Maggie stood before her bedroom mirror, studying the floral dress that had become an unwitting symbol of all Laura found lacking in her. She touched the fabric, soft under her fingers, remembering when she'd bought it, after her husband's funeral. Her first attempt to add color back into a world gone gray. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julia. You okay? Laura left right after you. I'm worried about you both. Maggie set the phone down without replying. What could she say? That her own daughter had humiliated her in public, that beneath her hurt was a growing realization that something fundamental was broken between them. She changed into a simple sweater and slacks, folding the floral dress carefully before placing it in the donation bag she kept in her closet. The action felt symbolic, a small surrender of something she had once loved. Later, as twilight softened the edges of her garden, Maggie sat on her porch swing, attempting to untangle the knot of emotions the afternoon had left her with. The creaking rhythm of the swing matched her thoughts, swinging between sadness and indignation, between maternal love and personal dignity. A neighbor waved from across the street. Maggie lifted her hand in return, the simple gesture reminding her that life continued beyond the painful bubble of her family drama. The world was still full of small kindnesses, a wave, a smile, a friend worried enough to check in. She reached for her phone and texted Julia back. I'm okay. Thank you for being there today. It wasn't everything, but it was honest. And honesty, Maggie was beginning to realize, might be the only path forward. Maggie was organizing her garage on a Saturday morning when Laura's sleek silver car pulled into the driveway. Her daughter emerged wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a designer tote bag. Mom, Laura called out brightly. Glad I caught you at home. Maggie wiped her hands on her jeans, puzzled by the unexpected visit. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. Laura's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Listen, my car's in for service, and I need to run some errands today. I figured you wouldn't be using your car this weekend, right? I can just borrow it and fill up the tank before I bring it back. Before Maggie could respond, Laura had brushed past her into the garage. She opened the trunk of Maggie's sedan and tossed her bags inside. "Laura, wait," Maggie began, but her daughter was already sliding into the driver's seat. "Thanks, Mom. I'll bring it back tomorrow." The engine roared to life, and Laura backed out of the driveway with a casual wave. Maggie stood in the empty garage, mouth slightly open, watching her car, her independence, disappear around the corner. The presumption left her breathless. Not once had Laura asked if she could take the car. She had simply announced her intention and acted. That evening, just as Maggie was preparing dinner, her nephew Alex called. "Aunt Maggie, I wanted to check something with you." Laura called asking for the spare keys to the beach house, said she wanted to take some friends there this weekend. "I told her I'd check with you first since I'm overseeing the renovation." Maggie nearly dropped the phone. "I never approved that, Alex. Please don't give her the keys." After hanging up, Maggie went straight to her bedroom closet. She removed all the spare keys from their hook and locked them in her safe, her movements deliberate and precise. The violation of boundaries had moved beyond personal slights into something more alarming. She sat on the edge of her bed, heart pounding. When had her daughter begun to see Maggie's possessions as communal property? The car, the beach house, the jewelry, all taken or attempted to be taken without permission or genuine appreciation. Maggie slept poorly that night, her dreams filled with images of doors she couldn't lock and rooms she couldn't protect. By morning, a quiet anger had replaced her confusion. This wasn't just about things, it was about respect, about acknowledgement of boundaries. When Laura returned the car late Sunday afternoon, she tossed the keys onto the kitchen counter with casual disregard. "Thanks for letting me borrow it," she said, already heading for the door. "Oh, by the way, it needs gas." Maggie picked up the keys, feeling their weight in her palm. "Laura," she said, her voice steadier than she expected, "next time you need to borrow my car, you need to ask first, not assume." Laura paused, eyebrows lifting in surprise. "It's not a big deal, Mom. What's yours is mine, right? That's what family means." The words hung in the air between them, revealing a fundamental difference in how they viewed their relationship. Maggie closed her fingers around the keys. "No, Laura, that's not what family means." Laura rolled her eyes and left without further comment, the screen door banging shut behind her. Maggie remained in the kitchen, keys clutched in her hand, feeling both shaken and somehow stronger for having spoken up. She walked to her living room window and watched Laura's car pull away, wondering if her daughter had heard anything she'd said, or if the gulf between them had grown too wide for words to bridge. The text message from her friend Marion jolted Maggie awake at 11:38 p.m. "Is this your necklace? Just saw it on an online auction site." A link followed. Heart racing, Maggie clicked it. The screen illuminated her darkened bedroom with the image of her pearl necklace, the wedding pearls, beautifully photographed against black velvet. The description read, "Vintage Mikimoto pearl necklace, excellent condition, family estate sale." Her hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped her phone. Estate sale! She was very much alive. The listing price was $14,000, precisely the amount needed for a luxury car down payment. "No," Maggie whispered to the empty room. She wouldn't. But even as the denial left her lips, she knew. She scrambled out of bed and rushed to her closet, yanking open the safe with clumsy fingers. The velvet-lined jewelry tray confirmed her worst fears. Nearly empty. The pearl necklace, the diamond brooch, the ruby ring, all gone. Only the gold locket containing Laura's baby picture remained. Maggie sank to the floor, the cold hardwood against her knees barely registering through her shock. The violation was absolute. Laura had somehow obtained her safe combination and systematically emptied it of everything valuable. The betrayal went beyond theft. It was erasure. Each piece had commemorated a moment in her life with her husband, a tangible link to their shared history. Now those connections were severed, scattered to anonymous bidders who would never know their significance. Dawn found Maggie still awake, her laptop open to multiple auction listings. She'd discovered not just the necklace but the brooch, the ruby ring, and several other pieces, all listed under different seller accounts, but with the same professional photography and similar descriptions. When her phone rang at 7 a.m., she answered mechanically. "I've been up all night too," Marion said without preamble. "I found more listings. Maggie, you need to call the police." "She's my daughter," Maggie whispered. "She stole from you," Marion countered, her voice gentle but firm. "This isn't about a misunderstanding anymore." Maggie closed her laptop, her decision made. No police. Not yet. But I'm going to confront her. She showered and dressed with methodical precision, choosing a simple black dress that made her feel armored. The woman who emerged from her bedroom bore little resemblance to the one who had retreated there in shock hours earlier. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back severely, her movements purposeful. Laura answered the door in yoga pants, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness as she registered Maggie's unusual appearance. "Mom, what's going on?" Maggie stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Where are my jewelry pieces, Laura?" Laura's face flickered with something. Guilt, fear. It vanished so quickly Maggie couldn't be sure. "What are you talking about?" "The pearl necklace, Dad's mother's brooch, the ruby ring. All of it." Maggie's voice remained steady. "They're being sold online right now." Laura crossed her arms defensively. "You never wear them anyway. They're just sitting in a safe gathering dust." "They're mine," Maggie said simply. The words felt inadequate to express the magnitude of the violation. But they were the only truth that mattered. "You're overreacting," Laura countered, shifting to offense. "I needed the money for the car. I was going to tell you once it was done. You broke into my safe and took my possessions without permission. That's not borrowing, Laura. That's stealing." Laura's face hardened. "You wouldn't help me with the car. What was I supposed to do?" "Accept my answer. Respect my boundaries." Maggie felt strangely calm now, faced with her daughter's unapologetic justification. "I want everything back, now." "I can't do that," Laura said flatly. "Most of it's already sold." The finality of it, the irreversible loss, hit Maggie like a physical blow. Without another word, she turned and walked out, each step crystallizing her resolve. The law office of Peterson & Marks occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise. Maggie sat stiffly in a leather chair across from Catherine Peterson, a family law attorney with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense reputation. "Let me understand this clearly," Catherine said, reviewing her notes. "Your daughter took your jewelry without permission and sold it online. The items had both significant monetary and sentimental value. You've confronted her, and she's admitted to taking them but shows no remorse." Maggie nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "That's correct. And you want to pursue legal action against your daughter?" The question hung in the air. A month ago, Maggie couldn't have imagined sitting in this office, discussing legal action against her only child. Now it seemed the only path forward. "Yes," she said firmly. "I want to recover what's mine." Catherine nodded, making a notation in her file. "We have two options. We can pursue criminal charges for theft, or we can file a civil lawsuit to recover the monetary value of the stolen items." The word criminal made Maggie flinch. Despite everything, the thought of Laura facing criminal charges was unbearable. "Civil," she said quietly. "I just want justice, not vengeance." Over the next hour, they formulated a strategy. Catherine would file a lawsuit demanding either the return of any unsold items or financial compensation equal to their appraised value. They documented each piece from Maggie's insurance records, photographs, and detailed descriptions. "There's something else," Maggie said as their meeting drew to a close. "I want to revise my will." Catherine's expression remained neutral. "That would fall under estate planning. I can refer you to my colleague down the hall. May I ask what changes you're considering?" "I want to remove Laura as my heir," Maggie said, the words emerging with surprising steadiness. "Everything I have, the house, my savings, the beach property, I want it to go to my nephew Alex and to charity." The attorney studied her carefully. "That's a significant decision." "Maggie, are you certain?" "My daughter has made it clear she's only interested in what she can take from me," Maggie replied, a bitter edge creeping into her voice. "She's not waiting for inheritance. She's helping herself to whatever she wants now. I see no reason to reward that behavior after I'm gone." An hour later, Maggie emerged from the offices of Peterson & Marks with 2 appointments scheduled, one for the filing of her lawsuit and another with the estate planning department. The weight of these decisions pressed on her shoulders, yet beneath the sadness was a curious sense of liberation. On the drive home, she pulled into the parking lot of a small cafe she and her husband used to frequent. Sitting alone at an outdoor table, watching people pass by, Maggie realized she was taking back control of her life, piece by piece, decision by decision. Her phone buzzed with a text from Laura. "Mom, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand." Maggie set the phone down without replying. For too long, Conversations with Laura had been on her daughter's terms, following her daughter's timing. Not anymore. Instead, she ordered a cappuccino, something her husband had always encouraged her to try, but she'd always declined in favor of plain coffee. The foam was light on her tongue, the bitterness of the espresso balanced by the sweetness of the milk. "You were right," she whispered to his memory. "Sometimes change is good." By the time she drove home, the lawsuit papers had been filed electronically. Tomorrow, Laura would be served with formal notice. The bridge Maggie was burning had been constructed of pain and disrespect. Watching it fall felt less like destruction and more like clearing ground for something new to grow. The beach house stood on a quiet stretch of shoreline 30 miles outside Chicago, its weathered blue siding and white trim a familiar landmark for locals. Maggie pulled into the sandy driveway, her car packed with essentials, clothes, books, a few treasured photographs, and the necessary paperwork for her new life. Alex had been overseeing renovations for months, transforming the weekend retreat into a year-round residence. Now, as Maggie stepped onto the wraparound porch, the fresh paint and new windows suggested possibility rather than mere maintenance. "Aunt Maggie!" Alex emerged from inside, wiping his hands on his jeans. At 28, he had his father's height and his mother's gentle eyes. "I didn't expect you until tomorrow." Maggie embraced him, drawing strength from the simple human contact. "I couldn't wait. The city house feels contaminated somehow." Alex nodded, understanding without requiring explanation. He'd been her rock through the lawsuit preparations, accompanying her to meetings and helping document the missing jewelry. "The master bedroom's all set up," he said, taking a box from her arms. "And I stocked the fridge." Together, they unloaded her car, arranging her belongings in the freshly painted rooms. The simple domesticity of the task soothed Maggie's frayed nerves. By evening, she'd unpacked enough to feel settled. Standing on the back deck as sunset painted the lake in shades of amber and gold, Maggie felt something unfamiliar unfurling in her chest, a tentative sense of peace. The constant knot of tension that had accompanied thoughts of Laura seemed looser here, less constraining. "I've left a letter for the neighbors," she told Alex over a simple dinner of pasta and salad, explaining that I've moved and asking them to respect my privacy. "The for sale sign goes up next week." Alex studied her across the table. "Are you sure about selling the house? It's been in the family for decades." "That house was for a family," Maggie said quietly. "I'm building something different now." Later, after Alex had driven back to the city, Maggie sat on the porch swing, listening to the rhythm of waves against the shore. The darkness was profound, broken only by distant lights from boats on the water and the faint glow from neighboring houses. She'd left her phone inside deliberately, unwilling to let Laura's inevitable messages intrude on this first night of sanctuary. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, the continuation of the lawsuit, the logistics of permanent relocation, the emotional work of rebuilding a life shattered by betrayal. But tonight, rocked by the familiar creak of the porch swing, Maggie allowed herself to simply breathe. The air tasted of lake water and possibility. Her husband had loved this place, had dreamed of retiring here. Though he hadn't lived to see it happen, she could honor that dream by claiming it as her own. A shooting star streaked across the night sky, brief and brilliant. Maggie closed her eyes, not to make a wish, but to offer gratitude for this refuge, for the strength she was discovering within herself, for the chance to begin again. The papers officially removing Laura from her will rested on the kitchen counter, signed and notarized. It had been the hardest decision of all, a severing more final than physical distance. Yet it felt right, a boundary drawn not from spite, but from self-preservation. Morning would come soon enough with its demands and complexities. For now, Maggie surrendered to the rhythm of the waves and the gentle sway of the swing, allowing the peace of her new home to wash over her like a benediction. The pounding on the front door came at 8:17 a.m., startling Maggie from her morning coffee ritual. She peered through the window to see Laura's red sports car parked haphazardly in the driveway, its front tire crushing a bed of newly planted tulips. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She hadn't expected this confrontation so soon, had hoped, perhaps naively, for more time to strengthen her resolve in the sanctuary of the beach house. The knocking intensified. "Mom, I know you're in there. Open the door." Maggie smoothed her sweater, took a steadying breath, and opened the door. Laura burst past her into the living room, her face flushed with anger. A lawsuit? Really? You're actually suing your own daughter. Maggie closed the door gently, determined to maintain her composure. You took what wasn't yours to take. I'm simply asking for it back, or for fair compensation. This is insane, Laura spat, pacing the worn carpet of the living room like a caged animal. First you move without telling me, then I get served with legal papers at my office. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? The irony wasn't lost on Maggie. Yes, Laura. I know exactly how humiliation feels. Laura stopped pacing, her expression shifting from rage to calculation. Look, if this is about the jewelry, I can explain. I was in a tough spot financially. I meant to replace everything eventually. With what? Maggie asked quietly. How do you replace memories? How do you replace the pearl necklace your father saved for months to give me on our wedding day? It's just stuff, Mom. Laura threw her hands up in exasperation. Things can be replaced. Not these things. Maggie remained standing by the door, a silent barrier between Laura and escape. Each piece you took was irreplaceable, not because of its monetary value, but because of what it represented. Laura's face hardened. Well, congratulations on your little revenge plot. Sue me, move away, whatever makes you feel better. Just know that after this stunt, our relationship is over. Our relationship ended when you decided my possessions were yours to take, Maggie countered, surprising herself with her steadiness. When you decided that my boundaries didn't matter. When you took the precious gifts your father gave me and sold them to strangers. Laura's laugh was cold. Nice speech. You know what's funny about all this? After you're gone, I'll inherit everything anyway. This house, your savings, all of it, so sue me if you want. I'll still have the last laugh. The cruelty of the statement, the naked anticipation of her death, stole Maggie's breath. She felt tears threaten, but blinked them back, refusing to give Laura the satisfaction. No, you won't, she said quietly. I've changed my will. You're no longer my heir. Laura's face went slack with shock. You can't be serious. Dead serious, Maggie replied, the grim idiom suddenly fitting. Everything goes to Alex and to Charity now. For a moment, Laura seemed genuinely stunned, as if the consequences of her actions were only now becoming real to her. Then her features twisted with contempt. Fine. Keep your precious beach house and your sanctimonious attitude. I don't need anything from you. She stormed toward the door, pausing only to deliver a final jab. You know what, Mom? Dad would be ashamed of you right now. The words were designed to wound, to pierce Maggie's armor at its weakest point. Instead, they clarified something essential. No, Laura, she said softly. Your father would be ashamed of what you've become. He taught you better than this. Laura slammed the door behind her with such force that a framed photograph fell from the wall, its glass shattering on the hardwood floor. Maggie knelt to pick up the pieces, her hands trembling but determined. The photograph inside was of Laura at age 8, sitting on her father's shoulders at this very beach, both of them laughing into the camera. Maggie carefully removed it from the broken frame, smoothing its creased corner. Some things could be salvaged, others were irreparably broken. Knowing the difference was its own kind of wisdom. 6 months after the confrontation with Laura, Maggie sat at a table in the community center, surrounded by blueprints and paint swatches. As the newly elected head of the Lakeshore Preservation Committee, she had the floor at today's meeting. The restoration of the historic lighthouse will begin next month, she announced to the assembled residents, her voice carrying with an authority that surprised even herself. Thanks to everyone's fundraising efforts, we've secured the full budget needed. Approving murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several people nodded appreciatively in Maggie's direction. After the meeting, Martha Jennings, a local artist whose opinion carried significant weight in the community, approached her. Maggie, I can't believe the transformation in you since you moved here permanently. You've breathed new life into this place. Maggie smiled, accepting the compliment without deflection. Another new skill she'd developed. Thank you, Martha. It's given me new life as well. The beach house had become more than a sanctuary. It had become the center of a community Maggie had barely known when it was just a weekend retreat. Now she served on 2 local committees, hosted a monthly book club, and had become the unofficial guardian of the shoreline's historical character. As she was loading her car with meeting materials, her phone rang. Alex. Aunt Maggie, good news. The court ruled in your favor today. Laura has been ordered to pay the full appraised value of the jewelry. Maggie leaned against her car. absorbing the news. The lawsuit had dragged on longer than expected, with Laura fighting every step of the way. How much? Just over $68,000. And if she doesn't pay within 30 days, there'll be additional penalties. Victory should have tasted sweeter. Instead, Maggie felt a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. "Thank you for letting me know," she said finally. "And thank you for being there for all the hearings I couldn't face." After ending the call, Maggie drove to her favorite spot along the shoreline, a small, secluded cove where the waves created a constant, soothing rhythm against the rocks. The setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and copper. She pulled a small notebook from her bag, the journal her therapist had suggested she keep, to document her journey forward. The entries had evolved from pain-filled remembrances to increasingly hopeful reflections. Today's entry would mark a significant milestone. The court ruled in my favor today. The legal system has acknowledged what I've known all along, that what was taken from me had value, real, measurable value. But sitting here watching the sunset, I realize something important. I've already moved forward. This verdict doesn't define me anymore. The irony wasn't lost on her. Just as she'd achieved this legal victory, she'd reached a point where she no longer needed external validation to heal. The woman who had sat trembling in a lawyer's office months ago, desperate for justice, had been transformed by something more powerful than any court decision: her own resilience. As twilight deepened around her, Maggie closed her journal and stood straighter, shoulders back, head high. The evening breeze caught her hair, now styled in a modern cut she'd never have dared try in her old life, and she smiled into the wind. Tomorrow, the local newspaper would run a feature on the lighthouse restoration project, with Maggie's photograph prominently displayed as committee chair. Her new friends would call to congratulate her. Life would continue its forward momentum. And for the first time since the betrayal, Maggie was genuinely excited to see what came next. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, its formal envelope bearing the insignia of Laura's law firm. Maggie recognized her daughter's attorney's name in the return address. For a moment, she considered leaving it unopened, another legal maneuver perhaps, to delay the court-ordered payment. She carried it to the kitchen table and sliced it open with careful precision. Inside was not a legal document, but a handwritten note on Laura's personal stationery. "Mom, I'm writing because my lawyer says it's better than calling. I've arranged for the full payment ordered by the court. The money should be in your account by Friday. I've also been doing some thinking. Maybe I was wrong about the jewelry. Maybe some things do have value beyond their price tag. I'd like to meet. Neutral territory, maybe that coffee shop near the marina. Just to talk." Laura Maggie set the letter down, her fingers lingering on the edge of the paper. The carefully neutral tone revealed little, but the request itself was unexpected. After months of bitter legal battles and the devastating final confrontation at the beach house, Laura was extending. What? An olive branch? A trap? Simple curiosity? She carried the letter to her study, formerly the beach house's smallest bedroom, now transformed into a space entirely her own, with bookshelves, a comfortable reading chair, and a desk facing the water. The walls were painted a bold teal, a color she'd always loved but had never dared use in the Chicago house. From her desk drawer, she removed a small velvet pouch, the only piece of jewelry that hadn't been taken. Inside was the gold locket containing Laura's baby picture. She'd kept it close during the darkest days, a tangible reminder of what had once been good between them. Maggie closed her eyes, remembering her husband's voice. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the wrong, Mags. It's about choosing not to let it define your future. She'd repeated those words often in her therapy sessions, grappling with their wisdom. Forgiveness didn't mean vulnerability. It didn't mean returning to old patterns or erasing boundaries. It simply meant releasing the consuming power of anger. The next morning, Maggie typed a brief reply. "Laura, I'll meet you. Friday, 2 p.m. at the Blue Anchor Cafe. Mom." Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the April sun feeling almost like summer. Maggie dressed with care, not in the floral patterns she'd once favored, but in tailored linen pants and a silk blouse in a deep aquamarine that matched her newly confident gaze. A simple silver pendant, a gift from her book club friends, completed the look. Laura was already seated when Maggie arrived, nervously shredding a paper napkin into tiny pieces. She looked thinner, her usual polished appearance slightly frayed at the edges. "You look different," Laura said, as Maggie sat down. Your hair? I decided it was time for a change, Maggie replied, unconsciously touching the stylish bob that had replaced her formerly long, often pulled back hair. An awkward silence stretched between them. Maggie didn't rush to fill it. She'd learned the power of quiet patience. Finally, Laura spoke. I paid the money. All of it. I know. I received confirmation this morning. Does that change anything? Maggie considered the question carefully. The money was never the point, Laura. It was about respect, about boundaries. Laura nodded slowly. I'm seeing someone, a therapist. She's helping me understand some things about myself. She paused, struggling visibly. Things like why I always felt entitled to whatever I wanted, why I never considered other people's feelings. For the first time in their conversation, Maggie saw a glimpse of genuine reflection in her daughter's eyes. Not manipulation, not calculation, something more vulnerable. That's good, she said simply. I don't expect you to forgive me, Laura continued, or to change your will back. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be different. Maggie felt something shift inside her, not the dissolving of her boundaries, but a softening of the anger that had fortified them. Change takes time, she said quietly, for both of us. As their coffee cups emptied and the afternoon light began to fade, no magical reconciliation took place, no dramatic embraces or tearful promises. Instead, something more tentative emerged, the possibility of a new relationship, built not on the painful patterns of the past, but on clearer understanding and stronger boundaries. When they parted, Maggie handed Laura a small package. This is the only piece that wasn't taken, she explained. I thought you should have it. Inside was the gold locket with Laura's baby picture. I can't accept this, Laura whispered, her composure cracking slightly. It's yours, Maggie said firmly. What you do with it is up to you. A year to the day after Maggie had moved permanently to the beach house, she stood on her back deck watching the sunrise over the lake. The early morning light transformed the water into a sheet of hammered gold, rippling gently against the shore. So much had changed in 12 months. The house itself had been completely renovated, walls removed to create open spaces, windows enlarged to maximize the view, the dark wood paneling replaced with light, airy colors that reflected Maggie's new outlook. Inside, fresh coffee brewed in the kitchen she'd designed herself, with its blue subway tile and butcher block countertops. On the dining table lay the final proofs of her book, a local history of the lakeshore communities she'd researched and written over the past year, to be published by the Historical Society next month. Maggie inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with the crisp morning air. At 65, she stood straighter than she had in decades. Her new haircut framed a face that had fewer worry lines than a year ago. Her wardrobe had evolved too, still elegant, but with bolder colors and cleaner lines that reflected her renewed confidence. The sound of car tires on the gravel driveway announced Alex's arrival. He'd come to help plant the garden, a project they'd been planning all winter. "Morning, Aunt Maggie," he called, climbing the deck stairs with 2 cups of specialty coffee balanced in one hand. "I brought reinforcements, that fancy caramel thing you like." She accepted the cup with a smile. "You're spoiling me." "Someone should," he replied easily. They worked together through the morning, digging beds for vegetables and flowers, arranging stepping stones, creating something new and beautiful where there had only been neglected lawn before. The physical labor felt good, a tangible reminder of how much strength she'd regained. "Laura called me yesterday," Alex mentioned casually as they broke for lunch. "She asked if I thought it would be okay for her to come to your book launch next month." Maggie paused, spreading mustard on her sandwich with deliberate care. Their meetings over the past year had been infrequent and cautious. Coffee every few months, occasional texts sharing impersonal news. The locket had reappeared once, worn around Laura's neck at their last meeting. "What did you tell her?" Maggie asked. "That she should ask you directly," Alex replied. "That you're strong enough now to set your own boundaries." Maggie nodded thoughtfully. "She's been different lately, more respectful of my space, less demanding." "People can change," Alex observed, "if they want to badly enough." Later, after Alex had left and the newly planted garden stood waiting for tomorrow's sunshine, Maggie sat at her desk overlooking the water. The golden locket, returned to her by Laura last month with the explanation that she wasn't ready to keep it yet, lay open beside her journal. She picked up her phone and composed a text to her daughter. "I'd like you to come to the book launch. May 15th at the community center, 7 p.m. The response came quickly. I'll be there. Thank you. Simple words, without the emotional manipulation or veiled demands that had characterized their relationship for so long. Perhaps Laura truly was finding her own path toward change. As twilight descended over the lake, Maggie lit a small fire in the stone fireplace she and Alex had built last autumn. The flames cast dancing shadows across the living room walls, illuminating the photographs she'd carefully selected to display. Her parents, her husband, cherished friends, and yes, even a small one of Laura as a child, balanced by newer images of Maggie's life now, standing proudly with her preservation committee, laughing with her book club friends, planting her first garden. The painful past hadn't disappeared. The betrayal and hurt remained part of her story, but they no longer defined her present or determined her future. Maggie Harris, once betrayed, once heartbroken, once lost, had found herself again in unexpected ways. The woman who stood watching the moonlight on the water was stronger than she'd ever imagined possible, more authentic than she'd ever allowed herself to be, and finally at peace with the understanding that healing didn't require forgetting. It required remembering differently, with wisdom, with boundaries, and ultimately with the quiet knowledge that she had survived not just intact, but transformed. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel and don't miss the next video, with more stories that will touch your heart.